Hi, everyone, and welcome to our third episode for this management plan and capacity building episodes or series. So, in this time, we are looking at the ecological and regional context of your specific reserve. So, this is important just to get that context of where's your reserve sitting, what is the vegetation layout like, so that it can better inform the management activities on your nature reserve. And then again, just a reminder, these are the chapters we're looking at. So you can see we're on section 2B. This won't be a very long video, as a lot of this context, there'll be a lot of help needed for a landowner to get up to speed with what the context is. So let me just show you the Word document for it. So what you can see again, it's in a shorter document of 6 pages, quite nice and set out. And the first little paragraph to get used to is looking at climate and weather. So these are all quite general. There are some suggested sites that you can visit to get an idea for the climate, but these will also be shared. But as I was saying, when it comes to maps, Cape Nature and myself are able to help with this regard. And this is definitely a section where it is definitely understood that landowners will feel very out of depth in getting this context. And this is where we are here to help. But just to run you through so you know what is this part B and the second chapter, it is this breakdown of the context. So you can see climate and weather, you can see topography, hydrology, and soils. And some of these can be quite broad, or it can be as in-depth as you'd like. The vegetation, this is great to go into a bit of depth, and each vegetation type has a certain amount of target that has been conservation target that has been allocated. And we speak to in this chapter how much of that target has already been achieved by a certain vegetation type and how much a particular nature reserve is contributing towards that target. So when an area has been recognized as a protected area, that is seen as a certain percentage of that vegetation type is seen as being protected and contributing towards that conservation target. So there's plenty of spaces for maps. It's important to document what the fire regime has been, where have the past fires been, what is the map of the vegetation in the region, how old is it due for a burn? Let's start thinking about ecological burns. Maybe there's sections, or the reserve can be broken up into blocks, and planning made around where's the most effective areas to start looking at an ecological burn. Or maybe it's burnt recently in a big fire and it needs to rest for a number of years. Then, of course, we know in the Western Cape, invasive species, it's great to get an understanding of where are the dense populations of the vegetation, invasive species on the property. Where does it make more sense to target your management? This might not necessarily be the dense areas. It might be the areas that are spreading. And so this is easier to control. And then when you've got that under control, we can then target the denser areas. So yeah, it's important. A vegetation, alien invasive vegetation map can help with this. And again, management units. What areas or how are we going to break your reserve up into units that can then be managed? Important to also consider is what species are there of conservation concern. This involves your fauna and your flora. So what is moving through the reserve? What little populations do you know, if there are populations of special endangered plants growing on a certain ridgeline or so? And again, there are contacts that can be made through CREW, through BOTSOC, all sorts of organizations work in the landscape that can help you to better understand your site, as well as programs like iNaturalist. There definitely are mechanisms out there. It is, of course, important if there are cultural heritage landmarks or aspects on the reserve to consider that and make sure appropriate protection mechanisms are in place, that these don't get damaged by grazing cattle or something like that. Then the section does bring in the regional and local planning context. So, and the first little bit addresses the protected area expansion strategy and implementation plan. So I'm not sure if many of you know, but every province has a protected area expansion strategy and implementation plan. And it's required that they reach goals every year, such as Cape Nature and how much land is being protected under protected areas. And there's a strategy for this work and ensuring that corridors are created, that it's not just a free-for-all without a plan. There's a lot of thought and intention gone behind this expansion strategy. And so when a site comes forward and wants to be a protected area, it has to link in with, and it's highly motivated if it links in with this protected area expansion strategy and aligns itself in one of the corridors for that particular time period. So again, being a protected area and being an older existing private nature reserve, the reserves are already in that expansion strategy as protected areas. And it's just good to know that there is thinking around those corridors, how to link areas and how to bring other landowners in on the process. So we also try and look at it from the municipal angle and bring in their integrated development plans and spatial development frameworks. So what has, at the municipal level, what have they zoned as different regions in their different plans? And again, what is great is that because the older existing private nature reserves have been in existence for a while, and lots of them you are on the data set already, it has been taken into consideration largely in these municipal plans that you are protected areas in that protected area network. And the areas that these private nature reserves generally are zoned as conservation also along those lines. But it is always good to get a feeling of what is happening in that municipality and what is being zoned as what in terms of development. So we do need to give that overall perception a bit of thought. Then, yeah, and the last little section, it also looks at the socio-economic context. So what are the pressures again in that landscape? Is there a need? Is there high unemployment? Is there a high density of people? Are there not? What does the socio-economic landscape look like in essence? So that is just a little summary on what is our chapter 2 and part B. And it's definitely understood that this is a section that a landowner would struggle a lot to fill in by themselves. But that's just what I've given you now is just an insight into what information is required in a management plan. And there's definitely help available to help put this information together and the maps and give that context for you. But great, have a lovely rest of the day, and I hope you are enjoying. All the best. Bye.